Hey guys, welcome back to another Op-Out video. Today I am at Roldorf & Co. checking out some of their new DOXA watches. They have just started carrying this brand and I always known DOXA to be that heritage dive watch with lots of history. I always thought it was a little bit too big for my wrist, but we are gonna go check it out. Try some of them out. I know they got the 200T, which is a slimmer model that was recently introduced. They also have the 300 and the 300T and also the 600 and 1200. Anyways, let's go find out together. Partially is to check out the DOXAs, but also I'm here bright and early today for a seminar session featuring none other than James Stacey and Jason Heaton from the Grey NATO podcast. About 20 of us watch enthusiasts from across Vancouver has gathered here today to learn about, well, dive computers versus dive watches. Not really much of a debate there if you ask me, especially since I don't dive, although I would love to, but something along the shores like within 5 meters underwater would be more of my thing. I honestly can't tell you much about what the lecture covered. The two things that I picked up are that orange dials are actually not more legible than your standard black dial with white lume indices underwater, and that helium escape valves are actually useless to everyone except saturation divers, and that the mechanism can only be put to use by the said diver once they bring it into the shop for the tuning to be tuned professionally. Like, you can't do it yourself once you're in the safety saturation chamber. You have to come out of water, go to a shop on the weekend, and then get it fixed and probably pay like 30 to 50 bucks.
They ain't fucking free!
I've also heard, I think this is from another video, about an interview with a professional cave diver. The diver said alongside with their smart dive computer, he'd wear a mechanical dive watch on the other wrist, in whose case I think was a panorized submersible, because during the days he spent camping in the underwater caves, which is so wild to me. In the scenarios when the trip has lasted so long that the batteries on the dive computer has run out, the mechanical watch is guaranteed to continue to run. Which to me is like, well, if the dive computer dies, like, how are you getting out of the cave? But I guess it works for him, or maybe he goes with other buddies who have like backup watches. Maybe that's the case. Anyways, I've also heard of divers preferring good old mechanical watches on the other wrist, as there's always so much being displayed on the dive computer. If they only just wanted to see what time it is or how long they've been submerged for, it'd be easier to just look on the other wrist. We got through the seminar, and while I've never been great at lectures, I have a lot of respect for James, Jason, and the main Jason, who is the owner of Roldorf, to continue putting on these free events to gather and educate watch enthusiasts across Vancouver. You rock, and thank you. Anyways, time for us to check out some DOXAs. I stood across the shop for the duration of the seminar, and the whole time I could not help but notice Jason was wearing a DOXA sub on his wrist. The yellow and the silhouette just really pops. Now seeing it closer in person, this watch is gorgeous. This is the sub 300T, measuring 42.5 millimeters across and 13.65 millimeters high, with a water resistance of 1200 meters. Definitely not a demure watch, but also quite a good size for a sporty diver or weekend or everyday watch in general. The 300T line has quite a long history, first launched in 1968 and was relaunched in 2019 with a few new bells and whistles. I also checked out the new 200T collection, which is essentially a slimmed down 300 with the same silhouette, dial, case, and bracelet. I found it unfortunately a little too small for my wrist. I was corrected by a few comments about the size of my wrist, and I think it's now like 6.5 inches or maybe 6.25. Anyways, I moved on from it pretty quickly. We had a guy who tried on a sub 300T and decided immediately that he wanted to take it home. So here the watchmaker, my apologies, I forgot your name, but he was sizing the bracelet for him. Way to go, dude. Roldorf's first DOXA customer, or so I think. This is the new DOXA Army. It's got quite a retro style, and I'm sure there's lots of folks who are into DOXA and are into the more heavy-duty, purpose-driven, or even military relation when it comes to watches. This watch hits the sweet spot for all of those things. I'm sure there's a lot of people like me who know DOXA from a book called A Man and His Watch. I can't really recall much of the story, but it was about a man who had a watch passed down to him with a bright orange dial, and he decided to investigate further before finding out that, wow, there's this brand called DOXA and they make amazing watches. Ever since seeing that story, I've always been gravitated to the brand. Like, damn, a watch that's featured in a Ben Clymer book that doesn't cost an arm and a leg? Like, what brand is this, man? I'm so down. And I don't know if you guys have these moments like these where you discover a brand, its heritage, its cultural influence, and you really want to get more into it, but it's just like, they don't make the watch for me just yet. Like, there's no silhouette, there's no model that I particularly want to dish out thousands of dollars for. DOXA has always been that brand for me. Breitling as well, but that's for another story. I find both of those brands so cool, but something just prevents me from seeing myself keeping this silhouette on long enough before I want to swap back to a Black Bay 58 or say a Prince Chrono. That was until I saw this DOXA Sub 300 Aqua Lung Shark Hunter Carbon. My issues, which I didn't even know were issues, with all the DOXAs are addressed as soon as I put this watch on. I noticed I didn't like the dead negative space around the outsides of the case and the lugs. That's fixed with this carbon case where, unlike the Carbon Tudor FXD, there's a ton of nuances in the patterns, making this watch feel something like a black hole of horology pulling your eyes to that dial, which is also in carbon fiber but a different, more nuanced texture. With the yellow highlights and that epic Aqua Lung motif on the southwest side of the dial. The whole watch is just so epic, loud, yet subtly alluring at the same time. This watch has earned a place on my list, and in that same vein, unlike Breitling's, I do now think DOXA has a watch for me. It's just a waiting game now for me to have the money for it. Let me know what you guys think about DOXA watches, and I'll see you in the next one. Doing a bit of a bonus segment at the end here. This is the book A Man and His Watch by Matt Hranek. This book is very famous in the watch industry, or I guess watch hobbyist industry. So if you haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, make sure to go check it out. It's not that expensive. Here in Canada, it's $54, which I know is a lot for a book, but for me, coming out of university, like, this is nothing compared to the textbook. So let's get into it. I want to share a excerpt on DOXA. I gotta find the exact page without... Okay, there you go. That's pretty fast. I was like, I don't want to get like copyright struck. I don't know exactly how that works when it comes to books, but better to be safe than sorry. Anyways, this is the DOXA sub that got me looking into DOXAs in the very, very first place. Before I have even seen a DOXA, before I have heard about the brand, this book, A Man and His Watch, is the first place where I saw this watch with the bright orange dial. And I want to read this story to you. Okay guys, regrouping here. I have read through the first like 3 sentences and I found that it was quite lengthy, more so than I remembered. So I'm just going to get to the important part here. Basically, after his grandfather passed away, he was determined to find his watch, like a brand for himself. And then he said a light went off. He knew about DOXA, even though he had no idea what it looked like. So he started researching people who knew the brand and even Clive Cussler's personal anecdotes, blah, 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 blah. And then he eventually, something has to do with Mercedes-Benz or Ford, and you wanted a clock in it, most likely that would be a DOXA. Interesting. Okay, so he then said, the few blurry photos he sent me of the watch got me really excited. Who is this? A guy in California has been given a DOXA Sub 300 Black Lung by his father. Okay, so there's the story probably of where this Black Lung came from. His father had purchased the watch in 1968. And yes, I'm not a good reader. That's why I got to put my index finger where the next word is to keep myself on track. By the way, wearing the Tudor Black Bay 58, my words are losing me here, or the other way around. In a dive shop in Florida, eventually he gave it to his son, who wore it for a short while before putting it in a desk drawer and forgetting about it for 30 years. When he packing up, blah, 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 and then anyways, so like it seems like he bought it. And then wasn't a mind-blowing expenditure. Keeping a watch for myself at this stage was luxury. Vintage watch, ultimate luxury, blah, blah. It's a book, there are chapters. DOXAs aren't impossibly rare watches to find, but they're certainly not everywhere. I've never been a guy who buys a watch to start a fresh book? Huh? Why would you buy a watch to start a fresh book? To start... Oh, okay, so he's saying that he likes vintage stuff. Got it. I'm crazy about these DOXAs and I wear mine all the time. I guess I've become somewhat known for DOXAs. I don't own them all. I just really love them and want them to be saved. And that is the story of James Lambden's DOXA watch.